There's another one. That's all. Well, the Duke is tearing up the peacock.
In 1995, a Hall of Famer stood before a federal judge in Brooklyn and pleaded guilty. The judge said that this man had suffered public humiliation right here in Brooklyn, where an entire generation had once idolized him. Then the judge added that he himself had been part of that generation. The man standing there was Duke Snider, the center fielder who hit the last home run at Ebbets Field and delivered the only championship Brooklyn ever knew. How could a man fall that far? Edwin Donald Snider was born on the 19th of September, 1926, in Los Angeles, California. He grew up in Compton, a working-class city south of the Sprawl. His father, Ward Snider, had played semi-professional baseball back in Ohio before the family moved west. Ward was not a famous man, but he understood the game with a precision that most coaches never develop. And from the day his son was born, he watched him with the careful eye of someone already planning ahead. When Edwin was 5 years old, Ward looked at the way the boy moved through the house, head up, shoulders back, as though he already owned every room he entered, and gave his son a name that would outlast them both. He called him Duke. Duke recalled it himself years later in the Sporting News in July of 1949. He said his father started calling him Duke at 5 years old and never explained why. He figured it was just one of those things that sticks. But Ward did something else, something quieter and more deliberate. He noticed his son was naturally right-handed, and he made a decision that would shape the next 4 decades of Duke's life. He taught the boy to hit left-handed. Ward had studied the geometry of major league ballparks. Left-handed pull hitters reached the shorter right field fences more often. They faced right-handed pitchers the vast majority of the time, a natural advantage. So Ward took his right-handed son and rebuilt his swing from scratch until left felt like home. At Compton High School, Duke became something close to legend. He threw a football 70 yards. His basketball teammate was a boy named Pete Rozelle, who would one day become the most transformative commissioner in the history of the National Football League. Rozelle was so struck by Duke's gifts that he wrote letters to the local press to make sure the world noticed. In baseball, Duke threw a perfect game and batted .411. His coach wrote directly to Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers in the summer of 1943. Rickey sent a scout. The scout signed Duke out of high school for a $750 bonus. A boy from Compton was going to Brooklyn. Duke Snider made his major league debut on the 17th of April, 1947, 2 days after Jackie Robinson changed the country. He was 20 years old, and for a time, the game nearly swallowed him whole. The problem was the swing. Duke had power that scouts described in hushed tones. But he was what the old baseball men called a wild swinger, a young man who attacked every pitch with the same ferocity, regardless of whether it was a strike or not. He struck out at alarming rates. Branch Rickey devised a training exercise that must have felt like punishment. He made Duke stand at home plate, bat resting on his shoulder, and do nothing but call balls and strikes as pitchers threw to him. Not permitted to swing, just stand, watch, and learn what a strike actually looked like. That exercise transformed Duke Snider's career. By 1949, he was a starter. By 1950, he was an all-star. And through the heart of the decade, he became the living symbol of Brooklyn baseball itself. Ebbets Field helped make him that. The ballpark was intimate in ways that modern stadiums are not designed to be. Fans sat so close that they could hear infielders talking between pitches. They could read the expression on a pitcher's face. When Duke stepped into the batter's box, fans in the upper deck would lean over the railing and shout down to people standing on Bedford Avenue below people who could not afford a ticket that day. They shouted, "The Duke's up." On his way home from games, Duke would stop and play stickball in the street with neighborhood kids. A star in his prime, on the pavement, with children who worshipped him. The Hall of Fame's own president later called him more genuinely woven into the fabric of the borough than any other player of his era. Through the entire 1950s, no player in Major League Baseball hit more home runs than Duke Snider. Not Mays, not Mantle, 326 home runs. 1,031 runs batted in, 5 consecutive seasons with at least 40 home runs, 8 all-star selections. He was not simply a good player on a great team. He was the heartbeat of a borough that loved him like one of their own, because for those golden years on Bedford Avenue, he was. Years later, a songwriter named Terry Cashman would capture that era in 3 words that have never faded. Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. The song came out in 1981. People who never saw a single game still know those three names in that order. If you followed Brooklyn baseball in those years, you understood a particular kind of suffering that was almost ritualistic. The Dodgers would build a magnificent team. The city would believe. October would arrive. And then the Yankees would dismantle them systematically, cruelly, and go home with the trophy while Brooklyn absorbed another wound. The Dodgers had gone to the World Series. 5 times, the Yankees had sent them home. The fans of Brooklyn, with the mordant humor that Borough specialized in, had long since adopted a motto that was equal parts defiance and heartbreak. They said, "Wait till next year." Duke had already given Brooklyn everything he had. In the 1952 World Series, he hit 4 home runs in a single series, something no player had done since Lou Gehrig. Brooklyn still lost. Duke had matched a legend, and it had not been enough. That particular wound did not close easily. By 1955, Duke Snider was 28 years old and playing the finest baseball of his life. He batted .309 with 42 home runs and 136 runs batted in, leading the entire National League in both the last 2 categories. The Sporting News named him Player of the Year for all of Major League Baseball. And when October came again, Duke carried Brooklyn on his back once more. The Dodgers lost the first 2 games of the World Series at Yankee Stadium. To many, it felt familiar, the old wound reopening. But the team returned to Ebbets Field and did not collapse. In Game 5, with Brooklyn needing a win desperately, Duke Snider stepped to the plate and delivered 2 home runs. The Dodgers won 5-3 and took a 3-2 series lead. 2 days later, on the 4th of October, 1955, pitcher Johnny Podres threw a shutout in Game 7 at Yankee Stadium. The Brooklyn Dodgers won the World Series. For the first and only time in their history, Duke Snider hit .320 in that series. 4 home runs, 7 runs batted in. He was the engine that drove the machine at the most critical moment. In his entire World Series career, Duke hit 11 home runs, the all-time National League record. He drove in 26 runs across 36 postseason games. And he remains, to this day, the only player in the history of Major League Baseball to hit 4 home runs in 2 separate World Series. In the same season that Duke Snider led the National League in runs batted in, delivered Brooklyn its first championship, and was named best player in all of baseball by the Sporting News, he did not win the Most Valuable Player award. He lost it by 5 points. Each season, a panel of writers ranked their top 10 players. Points were assigned by position. In the 1955 voting, Duke Snider and teammate Roy Campanella each received 8 first-place votes. The race was essentially tied, but one of the voting writers was ill. That writer submitted a ballot listing Campanella in both 1st and 5th place and left Snider's name off entirely. The first-place vote was counted. The 5th-place duplicate was voided. Snider received nothing from that ballot. Had that writer listed Snider 5th instead, Duke would have earned 6 additional points, enough to win by 1. Instead, Campanella won by 5. By every modern measure of player value, Snider was the superior choice that season. His wins above replacement figure came in at 8.6, Campanella's was 5.2, the numbers were not close. Only the ballot was. 1 ill voter. 1 empty line on a ballot. 1 award. Never to come. Duke did not make a public scene. That was not his nature. But the loss registered, and it would not be the last time the recognition he deserved arrived late. That same season brought another wound. During a second-half slump, the Ebbets Field crowd booed him. Duke, raised in California and still learning the emotional vocabulary of Brooklyn, erupted in the clubhouse. He told the writers present that Brooklyn fans were the worst in baseball. Those words were in print the next morning. He arrived at the park to a chorus of boos louder than anything before. Then he stepped to the plate and had one of the best nights of his season. The crowd went quiet, then roared. He said years later, "The fans were something. They were so close to you. You got to know them, some of them by name." He never called them the worst again. There is a moment in the life of every great team, every great city, when history turns a corner so quietly that almost no one notices it happening in real time. For Brooklyn, that moment arrived on the 22nd of September, 1957. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The Brooklyn Dodgers were playing at Ebbets Field. The game was not remarkable by any measure of standings or pennant race. But in the 4th inning, Duke Snider stepped to the plate against a pitcher named Robin Roberts of the Philadelphia Phillies and hit a baseball over the right field wall. It was the last home run ever hit at Ebbets Field. No one in the stands knew that. No one on the field knew it either. The borough would not learn until much later that they had just watched the final act of something irreplaceable. As for Roberts, he was a Hall of Famer, one of the finest pitchers of his era, and Duke Snider had hit 19 home runs against Robin Roberts across his career. No batter in the history of Major League Baseball has ever hit more home runs against a single pitcher. That winter, the announcement came. The Brooklyn Dodgers were moving to Los Angeles. The borough that had built its identity around its baseball team was losing it. Duke Snider, a California native, made the mistake of saying publicly that he was looking forward to going home. Brooklyn did not forgive it easily. He later said the quote was taken out of context. But the damage was done. He said this, though, and he meant every word. I was born in Los Angeles. Baseball-wise, I was born in Brooklyn. We lived with Brooklyn, we died with Brooklyn. In 1959, playing at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, Duke won his second World Series ring with the Dodgers. He was still producing, still formidable. But the Coliseum was a football stadium adapted for baseball, and its enormous left field dimensions swallowed balls that would have cleared the Ebbets fence. His numbers declined. His body began to follow. When Roger Kahn sat down with Duke Snider in the early 1970s to gather material for what would become The Boys of Summer, one of the most celebrated books in American sports writing, he expected to find a man at peace with his legacy. What he found was something else entirely. Duke told Kahn that he had once dreamed of being a big leaguer, but that was not it for him anymore. If it were not for the money, he said, he would be just as happy if he never played another game of baseball again. Kahn wrote it down and published it, and those words have never quite left the room. By the time that book appeared, Duke had already been eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame for 2 years. He would wait 9 more, 10 ballots, 10 times his name went into the voting. He later admitted that the obsession with Cooperstown had become as consuming as his old problems in the batter's box had once been. In 1980, on his 11th ballot, he was elected with 86.5% of the vote. He had deserved it long before. But the hardest blow came not from a writer's ballot, it came from a federal courthouse in Brooklyn in 1995. Duke Snider pleaded guilty to a federal charge of failing to report income, specifically more than $97,000 in cash he had received from autograph signings, memorabilia sales, and baseball card shows. He said he had begun taking those appearances because he had little in savings and had made a series of poor business decisions over the years. The avocado farm had not been enough. The broadcasting career had not been enough. He was sentenced to 2 years of supervised probation and fined $5,000. The sentencing took place in a federal courthouse in Brooklyn, a few miles from where he had once stood at home plate while the entire borough held its breath. The judge said that Duke Snider had been publicly disgraced and humiliated in Brooklyn, the very place where a generation had idolized him. The judge noted that he himself had been one of that generation. Duke Snider stood there and accepted it. He apologized. He had no other answer. After the courthouse, after the headlines, after the humiliation, Duke Snider went home to California, to Fallbrook, a small city that calls itself the avocado capital of the world. He had spent years imagining this life between innings. Now, at last, he was simply living it. He spent 15 years as a broadcaster for the Montreal Expos. His partner, Dave Van Horn, later said that listeners loved Duke because he could recall the details of situations from 30 years past with a clarity that made the past feel immediate. That gift for storytelling, the same one that made him play stickball with kids on the street after games, never left him. On the 27th of February, 2011, Duke Snider passed away at the Valley Vista Convalescent Hospital in Escondido, California. He was 84 years old. His wife, Beverly, was beside him. Willie Mays said, "Duke was a fine man, a terrific hitter, and a great friend, even though he was a Dodger." Vin Scully chose his words with the precision of a man who had called 60 years of baseball. He said Duke had the grace and the abilities of DiMaggio and Mays, and then added, "Although it is ironic to say it, we have lost a giant." What do we make of a life like this? A man built by his father's vision, crowned by a borough's love, broken open by time and his own choices, and quietly, stubbornly himself throughout all of it. He was not perfect, he was not simple, he was the Duke of Flatbush, and something far more complicated underneath.